Okay. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Just give it a couple minutes just before we get started. Just let everyone filter through. All right, I think that's pretty stable. Let's get going. So hi everyone, thanks for joining our webinar today. Today we're going to be discussing all things related to revenue operations. As we all know, business growth relies on clean, accurate data. It's the foundation to any successful revenue team. And in today's webinar, we'll be discussing how we're leveraging our data to drive growth, and ways you can build and scale an effective RevOps framework at your organization. Just before we continue, a few housekeeping points. So firstly, we would like to keep this as interactive as possible. So please do submit your questions throughout the webinar, and we will endeavor to answer these as they come in. If you have any issues with the audio at any point during the webinar, it is best to leave and then re-enter. This normally does fix the issue. I can also confirm that this webinar is being recorded. You can listen to this on demand later on, so please don't feel too guilty if you do have to shoot off midway. By way of quick introduction, my name is Saif Khan. I am the Associate Director of Sales here at Cognizant, and today we're joined by David Paulson, Anton Cornett, and Vincent Young. David, if you'd like to kick us off with a very quick introduction, if you may.
Of course, thanks, Saif. My name is Dave Paulson. I am the VP of Sales Development at Ringlead, and thank you all for joining us today.
Hi everyone, my name is Antoine. I am the Revenue Operation Manager here at Cognizant.
Hi everyone, my name is Vincent. I'm the founder and CEO of FunnelFox, and yeah, we usually work closely with revenue operations, so happy to be here today.
Great, thanks everyone for taking the time to join. So I think the first place that we wanted to get started with is just a very quick definition into what is RevOps, and why is it important. So just as a kind of brief introduction, so revenue operations is a business function that aims to maximize an organization's revenue potential. Forbes put it best, revenue operations was created as an end-to-end process of driving revenue from the moment a prospect considers a purchase to when you close the deal. So all the way from marketing to sales, all the way through to the renewal and upsell. The result of this orchestration is a faster growth and more profit. So with regards to, if we move on to the next slide, we've got the agenda, haven't we? Oh, are we kicking off with a horror story? Sorry, that's my fault. I completely missed a slide. My apologies, everyone. So just quickly running through the agenda is a good way to break the ice, right? I did that on purpose. So with regards to the agenda today, we're going to be looking at maximizing pipeline growth with data insights, aligning the revenue generation cohort with data, the path to clean, consistent, and complete data, and leveraging business intelligence. But we thought a really good place to start, since we have three experts with all things revenue operations today, is to get just a couple of horror stories, times when revenue operations wasn't running as smoothly as we would have liked. So if we kick off with Vincent, with horror story number one.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, there's so many to mention here, but I think the one that really comes to mind for me was one of the companies that we work with, let's just say a Series A software company. I won't say more about it, but they had, over the course of 1.5 years, burned through 2 different sales leaders, practically their entire sales team, and all based on performance, right? So the numbers weren't being met, so people were asked to leave at some point, and someone new was brought in to do a better job. It turned out in the end, once they started to do an end-to-end assessment of the pipeline, that the problem wasn't in sales, right? The problem was in marketing, and it was the fact that leads that were coming in through a new channel just weren't the right qualified types of leads. And that might seem obvious in hindsight, but it really required someone dedicated to look at all the different parts of the pipeline and really get to the bottom of this, right? And that is in the end what RevOps, a part of what RevOps is, right? Look at that entire view of what's happening. And in this case, because it was only done much later, the company wasn't growing, and it actually costed people their jobs. So.
Well, okay, so a takeaway from that is that it's not always sales' fault when things are going wrong, right?
Definitely.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
Can be, but not always.
No, we'll take that and run with it. That's my takeaway.
Right.
All right, perfect. Antoine, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Yeah, I guess what to kind of carry on Vincent's point is like I've always worked in sales ops, RevOps, and it's always been a kind of a huge challenge is like kind of having standardized reporting and have like a single source of truth so that everyone can refer to that. And every place I've worked at before, it's always like marketing have their own report and sales have their own report and CS have their own report. It's like they all have like a different view of what's actually happening into their world. I think that's why it's so important for to have like RevOps as like kind of an unbiased kind of actor to make sure that we have that single source of truth and we understand how the data is flowing through the system, so that examples like this don't happen.
Yeah, completely. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Antoine. And David, last but not least.
Sure. So being a sales development leader, it's important for me to work with both sales and marketing ops all the time, between sales and marketing. And one of the things I wanted to do at a previous company was run a win-back campaign. And so I worked with marketing. I notified marketing ops what we were doing. And then I worked with sales ops to put the list together for us so that we could call into it. We gave them the typical parameters for outreach, and got the list from them, uploaded it, and started calling into it. About 45 minutes into our efforts, we realized that we were actually calling into customers and open opportunities, and just an overall disaster. So I think having somebody in a RevOps position to kind of take point on these kind of efforts is incredibly important, for sure. But yeah, that was a tough day for my team.
How'd you get out of that one, David?
Well, we got on with sales ops and their leadership and just explained to them what was going on, and we simply had them pull another list. So we weren't able to do it that day, but the next day we just followed through on it and got the work done. But yeah, that wasn't the plan, for sure.
Amazing. Okay, thank you everyone for those very quick insights. I think, David, we're just going to stick with you for a second as we move on to point number 2 here. And what we just wanted to talk about was data as your shared source of truth, aligning the revenue generation cohort. So I think your story ties in really nicely here. If there was a little bit of better communication between the departments, there's a lot of awkward conversations that you might have been able to avoid. Be great to kind of get your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, RevOps is the linchpin between sales ops, customer success, and marketing ops. Their goal is to maximize an organization's revenue potential, right? So we all know that sales wants to focus on opportunities that have a high probability of conversion, and RevOps can help improve the quality of opportunities that sales is working by decreasing friction between the 3 ops teams and building a bridge between marketing and business development. This will definitely lead to driving efficient, predictable revenue.
Yeah, I think there's some organizations that will have the marketing and sales ops department under revenue operations, and because that's kind of what you were saying, right? Like as an overarching function. But I'm also seeing organizations, and that might just be the size of it as well, right? But seeing organizations where it's just revenue operations, right? So that's just like so instead of just being a coordinating role, they're almost doing everything, right? So they're executing as well, and I think, yeah, that I think it starts there. So I would say, and I'm just adding to what you're saying, right, David? But it's like, before you get the other ones, I think I would say you'd first need someone who can keep the overview before you start having the silos, so to say, right? The islands where people start working. And I don't know how you view that. Like, would you start with like sales and marketing operations, and once you see that there's a problem, you would put revenue on top, or do you think like revenue operations would be like the first place to start with?
I think revenue operations would be the first place to start, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That way that, when people are working on programs or any kind of campaigns or anything like that, they have a single person that can help them put all that together, and everybody moves forward as a cohesive unit, rather than, like we were talking about earlier, just being in their silos and trying to work together,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'd agree. You kind of start with like hiring a generalist that can do marketing ops, sales ops, and like own the CRM and all of that. And then as you kind of scale and grow, you can start specializing. But you definitely need like a generalist I'd say to start with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. I think we're going to move into the kind of the main body of the webinar now. I know that you guys are itching to go with this topic, so I won't keep you in any further suspense. So the path to clean, consistent, and complete data, and essentially what metrics to track. From someone in my position, there's lots of different metrics. It's very kind of tough to prioritize kind of key KPIs, marketing KPIs, so on and so forth. And as we've seen from the earlier horror stories, companies still get into a mess with their data, right? Those are the moments that we realize that we need alignment and connectivity across the whole customer lifecycle, especially looking at marketing, sales, and CS. And then that just really leads us nicely into a conversation about clean data, or as Vincent put it before, clean, consistent, and complete data. As I've name dropped you, Vincent, would you like to expand a little bit more on that point?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is one of the things that I've been advocating a bit longer already. Like clean data, I think it's a very well-known term, or like something that people have a bit of an understanding of what it means, right? It's like normalized, usable data, or like, and there's great solutions for that on the market too. Ringlead is an example of that, right? Like how to make sure that you can actually do something with the data that's in your CRM. But there's more to it, right? And that's kind of what we've noticed in the work that we've been doing. Like, and the second part, therefore, we're calling consistent data. So it means, for example, is everybody registering the data in the same way, right? If one person only registers one contact under an account and the other person lists every single contact, then if you're going to do an analysis of how many people you need involved in a deal before you can, for any impact on your success, you won't be able to do it, right? Because the data is not the same. And it's the same with like, do you only list the emails that are related to contract negotiations, or do you put in every email? And so your activity metrics might be completely skewed between different people in your team, talking about sales then, for example, but actually they're all doing the same work and you just don't know. So that's what we mean with consistent data, right? And then the third, complete data, making sure nothing slips through the cracks, of course, but also making sure there's no blind spots, which can be people or process, right? It can be people that just don't do it, people that might be out of the office for various reasons, or it can be data silos, certain systems or processes that are just not connected into what you're doing, but are having a key impact, right? And you don't know that you're missing it, right? We always think as soon as we see data, it's like, okay, now I have something to make a decision on, but that doesn't mean it's everything. It doesn't mean it's correct and comparable. And that's kind of what I meant to say with that.
Vincent, on that point, for a lot of people that are tuning in, this might be kind of the first time that they're looking at anything related to RevOps. They may have historically had a lot of marketing and a lot of sales, but no one really to kind of join them up. If someone was looking at this for the first time and they were looking to get on their path to clean, consistent, and complete data, how would you recommend them to begin? What sort of things should they be looking at first as their kind of lowest hanging fruit?
That's not an easy question, actually,
I
but
know.
let me give it a go. So where would you start? Well, of course, it depends on what part of the process you're looking at, right? But yeah, I think I would start looking at what you have and see if it fulfills these criteria, right? Like, is it clean? Is it consistent? And is it complete? And it's almost a checkbox exercise in that case. Like, compare, and you can do that through manual checks, right? Not everything has to be automated. But yeah, that's probably where it starts. It's usually much simpler than you might think it'd be. I mean, I don't know how the others feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say you yeah, you definitely need a data set that's complete as possible for like both for like from an inbound perspective. It's so critical to have the right data because you want to make sure that the leads are actually getting routed to the right reps, so they don't have to wait hours, days before someone actually pick them up. And from an outbound standpoint, you want to make sure, like, for example, here at Cognizant, we have like about 30 outbound SDRs. It's so important to make sure that we actually have the right data on like our account base, so we can make like an informed decision, data-driven decision, so that we're confident that we're actually giving the SDR the best accounts that will generate the best results for the company, really.
Right. And as a sales development leader too, I mean, you don't want your reps wasting a lot of time chasing down bad data and trying to figure out who to call, what the emails are. Is this real? Is it not? All that is a huge, tax on our time, and it's important for us to stay focused. And if the data is not clean and accurate, obviously it's slowing us down, and it makes it more difficult for us to hit our numbers.
Yeah, spot on.
I think generally, I mean, just because I had a bit more time to think about your question as well. And
Sorry, Vincent.
I mean, it starts in the end, it starts with like a challenge and or hypothesis, right? And then you start looking for the data that you need for that. So like what Antoine was saying, right? If it's inbound, then these are your priorities. If it's outbound, then they might be different. And that's where you focus your effort. That should always be leading, right? Like, of course, we would love to have a complete perfect data set, but that's probably never going to happen, right? Because of, yeah, let's not start there. But it's yeah, there's just so many interactions with the data set, and there's so many, and there's new systems that are coming in. So what really matters is that you know what you're trying to solve, and that you solve and that you get the right data for that.
Okay.
And I guess to wrap this up is also about, I think, understanding how each system is talking to each other, right? You've got your, if I think about this CSM world, for example, you've got your product data, and then you've got your like contact data, but they're not necessarily like, there's like some gaps there. Like, so it's really about understanding, like, if you want your CRM to be your source of truth, it's about really understanding how like each data point is actually flowing through the system, so you can be confident in what you go into your CRM.
I think one of the things that's also important to consider there is like, where's the data coming from, right? Because where it's coming from will define a lot of the actions that you might want to take, right? If it's entered by people, then that's very different than if you have a data provider that maybe needs to be merged with another one, and that's a whole different kind of challenge to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to pick on you a little bit here, Antoine. From someone that is, of course, within Cognizant, which is a data provider, you're kind of our go-to guy when it comes to all things kind of data completeness and essentially just having confidence in data as a whole. It'd be kind of great to just tap into, your vast experience and knowledge into it, just to kind of talk about the importance of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, like to kind of maybe give some concrete example, like I was saying, we've got 30 outbound SDR. They work like they all work about between 100 and 200 accounts a month, depending on which segment they're targeting. Maybe a bit less in the enterprise space, but it means like we're going through like thousands of accounts every month. So if and from each accounts, like then you're talking, 4 or 5 different contacts at each company. Again, more so as you go towards the enterprise space. So you really need to be able to feed that engine without having to then manually searching accounts and manually adding contacts. Like, there's not really any value add from them. Like, I'd rather have SDRs like purely focusing on, from the first day of the month, they will have all their accounts, all their relevant contacts, and then it's just going through a cadence of, you contact the account, you either book a meeting or like doesn't go anywhere, you nurture, and then you kind of go through to kind of read them there. So it's where, yeah, it's where it's so important to be able to kind of get that data.
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with what I was just saying, right? So if you're not maximizing your reps' time, being on the phones, reaching out, social touches, emails, things of that nature, and they're chasing down data, then it makes it far more difficult for for them to reach the people that we need them to hit, especially in an enterprise account, right? So we need, we're going deep and wide in these accounts, 7, 8, 9 contacts in some cases. And you're never going to get there if they're spending a majority of their time still trying to figure out who to contact and how to contact them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking there's 2 types of data actually. I just realized as we're talking about it, there's a distinction to be made. I think one is like the data you're using to do the outreach and to actually figure out, is this the right time, is this the right person, and so on, right? Create those lists. But the other is like, how are things going, right? Like, are we converting? Are we performing, right? And that's a whole different way of looking. I mean, I'm happy to talk about either. I just realized that there's a distinction to be made there.
Yeah,
and one feeds into the other, right? But it's yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's almost like you've got your third-party provider data that kind of feeds the engine, and you've got your CRM based on like processes that RevOps will put in together with like different leaders that will generate its own data that you can then analyze and like drive like metrics and all that sort of things. So yeah, I'd agree with you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to go back to something that David mentioned that was of kind of particular interest to me. Now, when you guys were speaking about, especially when it comes to enterprise accounts, right? We know from a prospecting standpoint, it can become very complex quite quickly. But a lot of what we've alluded to is that the actual account itself is so much more than just the prospecting side. It's actually post-signature, right? So that's when kind of the customer success function kicks in. Account managers, they're going to be working similar accounts to what SDRs have been working. With regards to ensuring that the process is clean, the data bridges and the gaps there are kind of completely aligned across different departments. From your standpoint, David, what kind of best practices do you think people can take away to ensure that they're affecting actionable change to make sure that's scalable moving forward?
Sure. So I think it's important that anytime you are working across multiple teams like that, again, everyone is aligned for it. That's why the RevOps position is so important. Making sure that the data is accurate is incredibly critical too. Like you were talking about when it comes to customer success, right? As everything in there that needs to be in there so that the success manager can be confident in what they're trying to do and know what they have to do, right? And so one of the things that we have found to be incredibly important is that by putting a data orchestration platform in place too, you're using multi-vendor enrichment and routing as an organization at the front end of all that, and deduplicating and preventing duplicates from even entering the database is essential, right? And if you want to maximize the success of your marketing programs into sales and then into customer success, I mean, you could potentially, save your organization a good time of time and money, just by making sure that the entire process is streamlined. And I think automation of this process is crucial in an organization's effort to maximize the efficiencies. Manual processes are subject to human error and overburdens an already overworked ops team. And as an organization continues to grow and scale, this process becomes unmanageable and won't scale. So I think that's why it's so important that there's the continuity across all 3 operations teams.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And one thing you mentioned there as well is when you mentioned CS, right? I triggered a thought that it's quite common. There's a lot of investment and a lot of time spent on getting this data right at the beginning of the funnel, right? So like we want to at that point create the right list with the right parameters and everything. But then as soon as we move further down the funnel, like let's say even already if we get to the account executives and later customer success, to be honest, in my experience, they're often a bit on their own after that, because that data is not that easily provided anymore. How are they going to get access to it, right? Like through what platform would they even get it at the moment? Because they're usually between their inbox and Salesforce and or some other CRM, of course, but that's what we often see. And then you know that doesn't provide them the same kind of intelligence. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges at the moment. Like there's so much data out there, but like giving it to the people at the right time is really, like, once you have it cleaned up, which is kind of course what we were talking about before, you got to do something with it, right? And yes, feeding the funnel with the right leads is very important, but then what happens afterwards is just as important in the end, but it gets a lot less attention. The further you move down the funnel, the less attention it gets, I would say. Whereas actually that's where most of the money is made in the end.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. Just a very quick question. We've just got something come in into the chat. Now we've got the question, our biggest problem at the moment is lead routing or lead routing from one system to another. What's the best way to automate this? Open question to the floor.
I guess David would be the right person to talk about that.
I mean, I can speak to how we do it at Ringlead. We do it based on named and target accounts. We're not geographically based. So what we do is we score our leads by using digital behavior as well as firmographic data. With the behavioral data, we prioritize historical data. Instead of just name. So our routing is set up so that if any of the leads come from these accounts, it is immediately routed to the AE or BDR, right? So if it's a target account, it goes to the AE, right? Because it's one of their 25 that they're going after and they want to be notified right away. If it's one of the other named accounts, it goes to the BDR so they can continue to reach out and nurture it. So that's the way we've set it up. Typically in a geographically based scenario, it's just going directly to the BDR, maybe with a notification to the AE. But every organization is a little bit different when it comes to how they want to set it up.
Yeah, ours is based completely on is it already owned? So we've got MDRs that purely do inbound. So they're going to be the one like dealing with all the incoming leads. And then we're going to look at, we've got a team that only go after like 1 to 10 companies, and then we've got a US team, a UK team, and then that's kind of how we've done it. But yeah, I guess like David said, there's no right way of doing it. It needs to be right for your business.
I think one of the most important things to do is to just make sure it's fast. Right? So,
right,
because that's the biggest benefit. Like I'd almost say it's better to get not the perfect person on the phone, but fast, than to get the perfect person much later on the phone. So that's what I would add.
I think that leads us quite nicely to the next question. I think the speed comes with a lot of clear direction, right? So a question from essentially from the group is, does training ever play a role in RevOps?
Does training play a role in RevOps? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So potentially a like smaller organization, and that would probably fall under RevOps. And as the company grow, you kind of have like sales enablement that will be a function on its own. But if you're a relatively small company, that will probably, you probably have RevOps kind of, it's like trainer, right? You kind of enable the department head so that they can then feed the message to the reps.
So would it be fair to assume then it's more framework and structure as opposed to actually training someone to do the role per se? Is that fair to assume?
Yeah, I would say that when you're relatively small, like you probably don't have time to like train everyone and do sessions, so you kind of build documentation, make sure it's easily accessible, make sure that the department heads understand the value of like the new processes and all of what you're trying to implement, and then they can roll it out more easily.
Okay. All right, great. Perfect. So let's move on to the next topic. Got lots to get through. So section 2 is all about how to maximize pipeline growth, especially looking at things like data insights. And we've got Vincent kicking off. So Vincent, if you could give us a little bit of insight from your standpoint, just some kind of actionable advice, what people are doing, what you're doing.
Yeah, so sales is a fast-moving space, as everyone knows, and I think my answer a few years ago would have been very different than what I'm saying now, and that's because at the time that was like when automated email solutions really started to trend, right? Now today, everybody can send 1,000 emails in just a few minutes if they want to, right? And that's what people are doing. Therefore, some are doing it very well, some not so much, right? And that what that results in is that our inboxes are just, especially those of the decision makers, the people that we want to reach, they're exploding. Even though like their internal communication has moved to Slack, at the same time they're still getting more emails. So that's more sales emails often that are coming in there. And the result of that is that open rates have gone down, right? So what that means, it's getting harder to get your message across. And it's become more important than ever to make sure that you reach the right person at the right time and with the right message, right? And that sounds so simple, but it's usually not done right. I think that's safe to say. Like that, and usually it's like, okay, I have these accounts, I need to reach out, I'm gonna try and be relevant. I can't find anything, well, I'll reach out anyway because, right? But that's not how you should be doing it in the end. You should probably you should just not be reaching out and find another account that is actually relevant right now. But that's just the tip of the iceberg in the end. So if you're using data insights, you need to be looking nowadays, you need to be using buying signals, you need to be looking at like the organization, you need to really understand who is your persona there, and is it actually that person. I mean, some of the most successful reps that I've been seeing, they're actually, they spend a fair amount of time on research. They're usually, on the lower end of the productivity bandwidth, but their conversion is so much higher that it doesn't matter, right? Their performance is actually better, and that's really, relevance is key right now. And there's so many data providers out there, so it's about figuring out what it is that defines a good customer for you. When is the right time to reach out? Then either finding that data set, and if it doesn't exist, create it, because without it, it's just going downhill from here. That's how I see it, at least.
We've got a question come into the group. Vincent, I'm gonna come back to you actually, but it could be an open question to the group. So someone's asked, how can you source quality data with added intelligence and added insights, but very kind of specific and niche verticals such as legal? Our experience with third-party list owners hasn't been great. So would you be able to kind of share any experience and best practice there?
Yeah, so there is a data provider for almost anything, I would say, but specifically I mean, at a general level, like there are, for example, healthcare data providers. There are, like, for different industries, there are providers. What we're also seeing in legal is, and this is just for that specific vertical, often the details are on the website, right? So with legal specifically, if you know the websites, I've seen companies just build their own scraper and just like get the data from there, right? It really, if your vertical is that specific and the data is available, that can make total sense, and it's a better return on investment than trying one list after the other, right? So yeah, the more specific you go, the more at some point you're going to want to do something custom, I would say. But generally, like, there are a lot of data providers out there, and especially like legal, I would expect for legal, I mean, it depends on the geography, of course, but I would expect that for the US market or UK market, for example, there should also be legal data providers. But you need to get the niche players for that.
Great. Second question, what's the difference between sales ops and RevOps? And it's a little bit left field from the kind of key topic discussion here, but anyone want to take that question before we move on?
Well, I guess sales ops on like historically only focus on sales, and then they would in like small organization they would also look after like tech stack, so like Salesforce or like the CRM, whereas RevOps has a much more holistic view of the whole kind of go-to-market strategy. So the like we said earlier in the intro, right? They'll look after marketing ops, sales ops, and post sales, and making sure that it's all aligned. So yeah, that's a key difference.
Okay, great. And then on the back of that, then, as we are talking about data insights, we've had one more question come in, and I think this is really a buzzword and a hot topic for a lot of people right now, and it's everything kind of surrounding intent data. Could be intent for people renewing, could be for people going. Be great to kind of get experience from the three of you regarding intent data and how that might link to your RevOps operations.
I mean, sure, I can speak to that. So data on the person is great, obviously, right? But what about aggregating that data to the company level, right? So you're trying to figure out as much about not just the person who's, has an inquiry, but more about the entire organization or the entire account. For example, when you're using intent data provider, you'll be able to get notified of a certain activity that one of your accounts is taking. But you don't necessarily know who that person is at that account. It could be one person or even multiple people from that account that are making that activity or taking that activity. So what really happens is as soon as a problem is identified for an account, that account starts searching for a platform, an app, a service, something, really anything that will be able to solve that problem for them. So I think, for example, in Ringling's case, people from ABC company are researching data orchestration, data quality, or data management, or just duplicates. But they're not asking the Ringling sales team for help just yet. If your team was able to be notified of the accounts performing that activity, they would then be able to prioritize them for their prospecting efforts, approach their target personas with more specific messaging, geared towards exactly what that account was searching for, and from that highly specific personalized prospecting, right? It's likely your conversion rates will increase due to the account, if you will, already actively searching for something to solve the challenge that they are facing, and your team approaching them in a very strategic way when they do their outreach. Does that answer the question?
I should hope so.
I think I'll say one thing to it. It's, I mean, you called it a buzzword already, and I have to call it out a little bit on that. But while there is a lot that happen on that front, so there are new ways that this data is being generated and being provided as well, which is like what David was mentioning, right? A great example of that. At the same time, it's, in my view, it's not something new, right? Like I mean, if you've ever used Google Ads, you've used intent data, right? So, and there's different ways. Like, to me, it just means like you want to know what's happening at the business that you want to sell to, right? You want to figure out what they're doing right now. Now that can be wherever that intent data is generated, but it could also be that they recently raised funding. I'm just saying, like a random other example, right? That might depends what my buying signal is for the company that I'm selling to. So again, I guess it really depends on who you're selling to and what you're selling to them, if intent data will make sense for you or not, right? It might be the best thing you've ever found, and it might just actually not have an impact. And it's about, yeah, it's about being specific about it and really understanding what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, amazing. Thanks everyone for the insight. We had another question then come in, just regarding marketing and sales handoff. And how do we ensure that incoming leads have the necessary information to be routed correctly? Anton, I'm actually going to come to you here because I know that that's a particular area of interest for you. Would you mind taking that one?
Yeah, well, I guess I mean, being at Cognizant, we're kind of pretty lucky, right? Because we can use our own data to kind of enrich leads as they come in, to then be able to make the right decision on who should actually action it. There's like loads of way you can go about it, right? If you don't have a tool like Cognism, of course you can just ask whoever is submitting a form to fill out that data as they submit the form. That's one way. Of course, you're going to risk that if you ask too many questions, that they're actually not going to complete the form. So generally speaking, you want to ask as little question as possible. But then, yeah, then once you can enrich, like, where is the lead based, what company size and all of that, then you can kind of put it through a router and evaluate a bunch of criteria that are like based on like the lead characteristic, and as well as that match it to things that are like currently in your CRM. But for example, if a lead comes in but it's actually part of a customer account, you probably want to route it differently than a lead that's actually brand new and doesn't exist in your CRM currently. So you kind of want to use both like external data as well as your internal CRM data to do that.
Okay, great. All right, let's move on to the next topic. I'm just kind of keen to make sure we cover everything today. So the next topic is essentially how to leverage business intelligence to target your leads, and essentially when they're ready to buy. So just personally, from a Cognism revenue generating perspective, business intelligence is more important than ever to us, right? We're coming up against competitors all the time, leveraging things like intent data to see when people are in the early stages of searching for particular topics, event triggers, so we know that specific decision makers that have just joined their job role are typically the best people to reach out to. They've normally got budget, they're normally to enforce some form of change. But I guess this is kind of open to the floor, and Anton, I'm going to come back to you here as well. How do you kind of utilize kind of business intelligence, and what do you think is kind of important to ensure that you're doing that accurately?
Well, I guess, yeah, it depends on like which product you're trying to sell, because not all triggers are like relevant to all businesses. Like I guess I will take Cognism as an example. For us, like we sell to sales team, SDR team. So for us, like hiring data is a big one, right? If they are if a company is actively hiring for an SDR manager or an SDR, they are more likely to want to invest into having the right sort of like data to feed that team. Or like you can, there's loads of other things, like you can look at, did they recently raise funding? There's loads of triggers that you can leverage, but it's about understanding like who you are, what your ideal customer profile is, and what actually indicate to your business that they are actually indeed ready to, more likely to engage into a buying journey with you.
I think one of the things that can help a lot there is like to take, assuming you have a good number of closed deals already, to take your closed deals and to go deeper on them and seeing where they were at the point in time that they engaged and where were they in the point in time that they closed. And this is not always as easy as it sounds, but things like news articles you can find pretty easily, press releases, that they're usually dated. Hiring, you can usually get a bit of a path on who joined the organization when, and those are just some like common triggers that can often give you some sort of signal. But if your business is up and running already, then you have a lot of this data there. You just need to figure out where the key is to it, right? If you don't, then you can just go out with a hypothesis, right? So you just go, well, I think based on how we know our customers, that probably it's when they hire the CRO is a good moment for us to come in, right? Well, if that's the case, then let's create a list based on that data. But it's important to have a scientific method basically behind it, and to start using that data to prove if you're right or wrong about what that means, right? Because if you're just throwing data at it and you're not trying to measure if you're achieving what you want in a targeted way, then you cannot scale it, you cannot reproduce it, because you will not know what actually worked.
So is it then fair to say that especially when it looks at things like sales development, just having loads of data is not the answer? You could have every tool in the world, right? But if there's no framework, if there's no strategy, if there's no kind of thought process behind the way that you're utilizing the data to make effective strategic decisions, it doesn't really matter how many tools or how much different data or how rich the data is that you have made available to you, right? David, especially kind of in your position, is that a fair assessment for me to make?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like I was saying earlier, we definitely want targeted outreach, and we want it to be relevant to the people that we're reaching out to. Just the canned emails that go out, or something that actually isn't pointed to something that's recently happened within the organization, it just falls on deaf ears. For example, like a big one would be an acquisition, something of that nature, right? So integrating two CRMs is usually a data nightmare. And some organizations, it can take upwards over a year to even begin to start the process and make it effective. So yeah, I mean, really understanding what's going on inside that organization is going to make your outreach very targeted and relevant to what they're doing.
Okay, great. We've got a question that has just come in to the group, and I love this question because I know it sparks furious debate whenever I see it on LinkedIn anywhere. And the question is, should sales development sit under ops, marketing, or sales?
Well, I've had a sales development organization under both, right? I learned a lot while I was reporting to a CMO more about marketing, because I've always been in sales, right? So my foray into marketing was a learning experience for sure. I learned a lot more about marketing, what they're doing day to day, and how it directly affects the top of the funnel, right? And how it affects the bridge between sales and marketing. So, I mean, that can be a very effective approach to it. The teams that I build the idea is to not have them remain a BDR or SDR for an extended period of time, right? Especially if you're in a scaling organization, what you want to be able to do is to build a career path for them to move into more of a sales position, like an AE or a customer success role. And so that's why I always felt, for me personally, that I prefer to be under the sales organization, just because there's a continuity within that organization as to how to get a BDR to the next step or the next level of their career.
I can only agree, but it's, yeah, the market is clearly showing that it's often being put under marketing nowadays, right? I'm fully with you, David. Like, I think because these are all roles where you're interacting directly with the customer, so it kind of feels like it's a similar skill set, it's a similar way of developing the people that are under it, and as you say, from SDR to AE, that's the natural path, right? Like, that is usually the route that people go. I do understand why it's under marketing though as well, right? So yeah, we're seeing both. But in the end, if I'm honest, it doesn't, to me, it wouldn't matter. Like, if the organization is aligned correctly, it shouldn't matter. Let's put it that way, right? Like, because there's strengths that marketing can bring in that might make you more effective at having this under marketing being completely aligned with what's happening on that side. There's also clear strengths with what's happening on the sales side. I guess, to stay on topic, if you have good revenue ops, it shouldn't matter. Let's put it that way.
Do you think it varies based on the type of business that you are, right? So, for example, in my role, I speak to a lot of companies that are huge, kind of well, huge is the wrong word. I guess they have very kind of complex enterprise only level sales cycles, so that intertwinement between sales and marketing is a lot more important, which is why the SDRs can often fall within marketing. Whereas with a lot of organizations, for more transactional sales, and it's more volume based as opposed to more intelligent is, again, maybe the wrong word, but a lot more transactional sales, that's where it falls under the sales remit. Do you think there's a potential use case that it could be both as opposed to one or the other?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, the examples you just gave were perfect, right? So, if your effort as an SDR is to simply introduce ideas and be more consultative, I guess that it would make sense for you to maybe fall into marketing. And if it's, like you're saying, more transactional, more hard charging, it might make more sense to be under sales.
Yeah, that's actually really good insight. Agree.
Okay, great. We are moving towards now the back end. So to close out the webinar today, I know we started the webinar today based on a horror story. So I thought it was only right, as the sun is shining, to finish on a more positive example of when RevOps was done essentially really well, or you know what the essentially results were on the back of that as well. So whoever kind of wants to kick off first with an example would be great.
Sure. I mean, I can speak to what we're doing here at Ringlead. We have a person who's our RevOps leader, and he's instrumental in making sure that that sales and marketing are aligned, that any kind of operational issues that crop up daily get resolved in a timely manner. And he's just our point person on that. And so it reduces the friction between the teams, and and if you're going to be a highly functioning organization, that's an incredibly important component of it.
I mean, I guess I am slightly biased being a RevOps manager, but I guess, yeah, I think you can quickly make an impact, like implementing a RevOps function, like making sure that you have, like, as I mentioned before, you have that standardized reporting. You make sure that you have that one person that really understand how the data is flowing through your system, and making sure that, yeah, you can make data driven decision, and like very quickly you're in a different place, you're a different organization.
I had to think of an example because of the legal question, the legal data question. One of my favorite things I've seen is like when RevOps kind of takes the lead. This was one of a software company as well that we're working with in London, and they kind of coordinated with marketing and sales to figure out what is their ideal data set of what they needed, and part of it they bought and part of it they built. So they actually built their own like scraping tools and everything, and they created a data set, but it tripled conversion, right? So it's, I mean, whatever hours of development you stick into that, it's absolutely worth it. So I mean, I know it's not a typical example of what revenue ops does, but that's what's possible if you get the right data in place, right? And sometimes it will need some work. Sometimes you'll be able to buy it somewhere, but a lot is possible with that.
All right, perfect. Thanks, everyone. I think a really nice way to kind of finish off, we've just got just short of 50 people still on here, is to open up the floor. So you've got 3 experts and a mini expert here to leverage. Are there any questions from the group? We'll give it a few moments just for a few to come in here, if any.
Can hardly imagine we've answered all questions.
Okay. Doesn't seem that we've got any coming through so far. I assume everyone's gone out to enjoy the sunshine, but I think we've covered loads today. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join. Again, just a roundup of the housekeeping before we wind up. Just a big thank you for everyone for taking part. Thank you for the questions that you've put to the group. Hopefully there's at least 1 or 2 takeaways that you can take back into your organizations. The call again has been recorded, and we'll be sending out the recording tomorrow to everyone who's registered. We've just got one come in the last 30 seconds. Guys, do you think we should answer the question? I think we should, right?
2 actually.
Yeah.
2? Are there 2? Oh,
Yeah.
all right, perfect. I'm not redoing the housekeeping stuff. So the first question is, any tips to get people to fill out intake forms?
The less required field you have, the better. I'd say that's as a general rule.
So intake forms meaning like lead submission forms, for example? Is that what you mean with that?
I presume so, right? Inbound
Yeah.
forms. Yeah, I'd presume so.
yeah, I'm with Antoine. That's the golden rule, right? Like,
Okay, less is more.
less is more, and make clear why they're filling it out, and what they're gonna get for it.
Okay, cool. Another one come through. What should RevOps KPIs be?
I mean, I don't think RevOps have KPI per se for them, right? It's like it's tied to their general business. Like their KPI is SDR successful, is marketing successful, is sales successful, and how do you measure that? That's how RevOps is measured. No, like it's not the department itself, I'd say.
Okay. And then last one, what are the key skills to look for when hiring a RevOps lead?
Let Antoine take that one.
Well, I mean, you're putting me on the spot here, but I'd say, if it's the first RevOps person you're hiring, you probably want someone who, like a generalist, so someone who is like comfortable, like technically comfortable, that can kind of own the CRM for you, at least until you can get to a certain growth stage, but also kind of stakeholder management skill is probably like a really important one for RevOps, right? Like you work with different departments and different people every day, so it's really important that you can deal with every stakeholders and kind of manage expectation, right? Everyone wants their project to be done like today. Everything's urgent, so it's about managing stakeholder and managing expectation.
That was a shot at me, wasn't it, Antoine? Me and John.
I mean, it's a very versatile role, right? Because what Antoine's saying, I mean, completely agree. But at the same time, like strong on data, strong on process, like those are definitely skills I would expect. Like I think you have to have them because of everything we've been speaking about right now. Like that's you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with reporting. You have to, yeah. All these things are key to do a good job at this, I think.
Yeah.
David, anything from your side on that one, on that last point?
No, I mean, I agree with what they both just said. I mean, the versatility of it is really what it's about, right? So having a keen understanding of, the CRM as well as the marketing automation platform, right? Understanding, like I was saying earlier, that they are the linchpin between sales and marketing. So you have to have a very good understanding of, what we're trying to accomplish as you're building the bridge between the two different departments. So it's key.
What's interesting, and we looked into this a little bit, is that there's a few profiles of revenue operations people, right? There's the sales rep that changed role, which is one. That's usually in smaller organizations, right? They needed someone's technical enough to take on the job, usually goes after CRM integrations and those kind of things. And then there's people that really make a career out of it and that, have different revenue ops roles at different organizations. And I guess depending on the stage where you are as a company, I think that will also define what you want to see in terms of experience, right? But I would say typically, if you have the resources, just promoting a sales rep, so to say, like usually that's a different skill set in my view, unless you have someone that's very technical or that's already seems a good fit.
All right, perfect. I think on that note, with a minute to go, we've hit the time right on the nose. So just a big thank you again to everyone. Vincent, Antoine, David, thank you very much for taking the time to join and for giving all of your insight. I know for sure I have learned loads. So thanks everyone. Recording will be going out shortly. And yeah, have a great rest of your day and best of luck with the end of Q1.
You too.
All right, thanks everyone.